Beep, beep. What is up, ninjas? My name is Sam World, and if you've made it this far, I commend you, because today we're going into the effects section of Diva. Now, Diva's going to have some of the more amazing effects out of any synth out there, in the fact that the effects just sound really nice. It's probably one of the only synths where I would actually leave the effects on, like the reverb and the delay on the sound, instead of using like a third-party one, because it just has such a great sound. And in today's video, we're going to be going over how to use them. With that being said, guys, if you want to support the channel, make sure to head over to evilsounds.com, where you can find all my sound design work. And let's get straight into this. So here we have beautiful Diva, guys, and on the bottom right is where our effects are going to be. For this, we go into presets, templates, and we can pick any. Really, we can go with maybe a Juno 60 for this tutorial. And we're just going to go with a basic saw for now, and yeah, and just play that. Okay, now, like I said, Diva here is going to have a total of 6 or 5 effects, it looks like. Chorus, phaser, plate, delay, and the rotary. The rotary is going to be our distortion unit, which is modeled after an old Leslie cabinet unit. And if you don't know what that is, don't worry, I don't either. But that's going to be our distortion unit. We're going to have, of course, a reverb, which is a plate. Now, a plate reverb is going to be more two-dimensional. What that means is that usually plates reverbs tend to be a little bit more in your face. It's not like a hall where it's more pushed to the back of the mix. From there, we're going to have a phaser and a chorus. Okay, so we're going to start with the first setting here, which is a chorus. Now, if you don't understand the theory of choruses, don't worry. Best way to put it, a chorus is going to grab, let's say, the saw we have. It's going to duplicate it a couple of times depending on how many voices the chorus has. So in some choruses, you might find like a voice number. You could put it to 4, 6, etc. The more voices, the more you could say it's like 5 saws. And from there, it's going to be modulated, the pitch, the timbre of it, the color, and pan to the left and right to create some width, depending on what kind of chorus you're using. For this one, we are going to utilize it in order to create a bit of width. So we're going to put the width maybe at 100%. Okay, now, like I said, a chorus will have a modulation, so there is an LFO involved, and that's where we have a rate and a depth. Very simple to use. The depth, think of it as sort of like how much of the modulation. So when we have our envelope to open the filter, this is the depth, how much we're going to go by. And then the rate is how fast it's going to be happening. So if you want more of a lush sort of, let's say like very kind of ravey sound, then we might go with a higher rate than a lower rate. You can kind of see it as higher detunement in a way as well. So that's controlling that. From there, we are going to have different types of choruses, and the way that they work is just the color they give and how they are essentially modulating. So we have a classic, we have a dramatic. You can definitely see the dramatic makes itself known. Like you hear that and you're like, there's the damn chorus on there, and it's definitely like, you know, I'm here. The classic's a little more traditional, kind of like it sounds like, oh, he just detuned it, like 5 super sauce or some sauce. Sorry. From there we have an ensemble. You can see how each one has a distinct color to it, and in all honesty, there is no right or wrong with this. But the chorus is a great effect. For instance, what I can do is if you're trying to create stereo sounds, pads, strings, this is what the one you're going to want to go with. We can put a low cutoff to the saw. Play it a little higher up so it's not so evil-ish. We're going to put a bit of an attack and release to the envelope so that way it's more smooth. And you kind of get more of the string analog emulations like a Solina. And it sounds very beautiful. It's like you kill the depth to it. So effects, guys, are like waxing the sound and just, you know, getting ready for it to be bought in essence. And you can see how it just brings sounds to life. So that's just the chorus. We're going to move on to the next one. All right, guys. Now, the next effect we have is a phaser effect, which if you don't understand the theory behind it, you don't need to. But all you have to know is it's a filter with abrupt cuts happening at certain spots, and then you're modulating that left and right. Now, if you know with any abrupt cuts that you do mess with the phase of a sound. So sometimes you'll get like a comb filter effect, etc. So that's what a phaser is, and we're moving it left and right. Maybe not as a comb, but somewhat you do get a similar sound at certain when you set it up a certain way. But best way to think phaser is going to be similar to a chorus. There's change, there's movement happening with it. So we do have a rate and a beat, and we do have a sync. Now, the important thing to note with this guy is that when we're not in sync mode, we're going rate. Left to right is slow to fast. while we're synced, beats right to left is fast. So if we're on the left side, the effect is fast. If we're on the right, it's a lot slower. From there, we have a depth knob. So that's going to be, again, similar to the chorus in the sense that if we have an envelope here and we're opening up the filter, the depth is going to be how far we're going. How far are we opening this up by? So this is going to give us a more big change. It's going to go farther. And down here, it's a little less abrupt, which is good if you're going faster rates because you don't have too much change happening all of a sudden, giving you like a kind of effect. Okay, to the right of that, we have the LFO phase. So if you remember, that's just picking where at in the phase of the LFO we are at. Are we at the top? Are we at the bottom? Where you want to start. Okay, from there we have a wet, so 0 dry, 100% dry. At 50, we have 50% dry, 50% wet. Now the volume is changing. So here, once we start going above that, here you can state that the dry signal is at 20%. 20% of the volume is dry, while again the 80% of the sound we're hearing is the 80% wet, and then 100%. So we can run it essentially in parallel, which is 50%, half and half. Below that, we do have a stereo knob, which you're gonna hear that more noticeably with the other type of mode, flange. Going from wide to mono, where the effect occurs. Stoned has essentially a set. I think it doesn't go as much as a flange. And then to the left of that, we have a feedback, which is how loud the effect is. It's kind of like a volume for it. I think that's the best way to explain it, how intense the effect is. You can kind of give more depth to it. And finally, the last parameter is the center frequency we're revolving this effect around. I think the best way to put it is, if you remember how I stated the phaser is sort of like a filter with abrupt cuts, is where in the cutoff are we in that? And then from the depth, you're going to control how far we move. We can be up here, depending on where you put. If the depth is high, you're going to be doing this. If the depth is low and you're here, you might be doing something like this. And if the depth is middle, then you might be doing something like this. But when you move the cutoff, you're changing that center frequency, the start of the modulation, where it's at. So we could probably do, let's say, high feedback. We want it in the higher frequencies. We can put it high. Let's turn this on. Lower frequencies, higher frequencies. Again, that's where we're putting the effect at. Okay, so then if you go to stone, higher frequencies, lower frequencies where we're at. So that's how the phaser is going to work. Okay, and we do have two different modes, flange. I like flange a lot more than stoned, the stone vibe. Now, the next effect we have in Diva is one of my favorites because I think the reverb sounds really good if you know what it is, and it's a plate reverb. Now, plate reverbs tend to not be three-dimensional, which what that means is the fact that a hall reverb will push the sound back to the mix, while a plate is two-dimensional, which means that you just hear it more. Plate reverbs are good for vocals, good for synths that you're trying to maintain in the front of the mix. But again, it doesn't mean you can't get a little bit of depth with it if you want. Okay, so first off, we have a dry signal, which is the volume of our unreverbed signal. And then we have the effect itself, which is the reverb. So usually when I'm deciding a reverb, I do have the wet up, and then from there I decide what kind of reverb I want. I have a reference. Let's say I'm hearing a synth and I'm like, it has this very kind of dark, not so bright reverb. Then from there I can start to input certain settings depending on what. Usually a lower size reverb will be more lively, more high frequencies to it. It's going to be more in your face, while a higher size reverb, more of a cathedral, let's say, it's the highs sort of aren't as pronounced. It's a little bit more like damp. Or like, you know, if I was rich and I had a bathroom, this is probably the kind of reverb I would get in there. It'd be like a cave, man. Okay, so the size is the size of the reverb. The wet, again, is the volume. So we can bring, and then we get that. It has a distinct sound, again, so don't try getting certain kind of reverbs with it. Know what it's for and know what you can get with it. So from that, we do have other settings like a pre-delay, which is very useful in the sense if you have a sound and you want that sound to punch through the mix, and then the reverb comes in, and this is where you would set that. That's the pre-delay. How long it takes for the reverb to kick in. Okay. From there, we do have a diffusion. Best way to explain diffusion is that when a sound comes out, if there's nothing in the room, let's say to scatter the wave or scatter the sound, then you get a very clean signal back. Essentially, you get an echo in a way with lower diffusion. You can kind of hear how it's very sort of delay-ish in a way, but it has an effect. But with a higher diffusion, you're kind of, best way to put it is, let's say I have a voice and then the reverb kind of repeats it. The higher the diffusion, the less you're going to be able to tell what I was saying in the reverb. So it kind of like, you can think kind of like mushes out the sound, giving you more of a reverb that is like, rather than, I think that's the best way to put it. From there, we have a damp knob. So like the name suggests, damp, you're kind of making the high frequencies less existent. But what happens is that the high frequencies at higher damps have a lower decay. Let's say I have a decay here. My high decay might be, for the high frequencies, might be lower than that, while the lower ones stay the same or get increased. That's usually how a damp works. Okay, and then from there we have decay time, which is how long it takes for the reverb to fade out. So depending on what kind of sounds I'm making, usually for synths, very fast sounds, I will go with a lower decay value, because the reverb is going to be constantly being activated. While if I'm just playing a sound hitting one note, and it's going to be a sound in the song that's used more as like, and I want that bleed or that decay to be longer, then we can go with that. I wouldn't do it like this though, because then the reverb gets a bit messy, as you can see. So that's where all of these values come in handy. From there, we have a delay. Now the delay in Diva can be a little weird to use, I'm not gonna lie, but it's super cool because you have different sort of parameters to play around with. First off, we have a dry signal, so it's sort of using it as a send and return kind of format. But then we have the center volume and the side volume. I think that's very self-explanatory. Delay down the center. So if you want a mono delay, lower down the side, or if you want more of a wide delay, more ping pong, then we would put the side up. From there, we have our filtering HP and LP, which is applied to the effect itself. So usually with delays, if you want the delay to sound a little like, not like the original sound, but a little bit of a lesser, manlier version of it, then we can use the low pass, which remove highs, and the high pass to remove the lows. And again, that's going to be on the delay itself, not the sound, unless you're running like this. No dry, then it's going to work a little different there. Okay, so we have center side. Let's set it like there. From there, we'd have the feedback, how long the effect lasts for. I think it's the best way to put it. High feedback, it's still going, still going. Go even higher. Still going, still going, still going, still going, still going, still going. And then high feedback, you get an infinite loop. So it's just going to keep on doing its thing. It's never going to stop when you have it at 100%. There it is. And you have an infinite loop, which you can do a lot of cool stuff with if you wanted to really. It's still going. You can lower it down a bit. And now it's going to fade out. Now, if you're into lo-fi, to the left of that, we have the wow. So the wow, usually it's going to be a modulation that I believe happens on the rate of the sound. And having it high, you can emulate sort of like tape wobble. It sounds very kind of old school-ish. And now we put it down. More, yeah. But now wow, we're adding that rate, that modulation. You can hear like, it's sort of like makes it sound very old school. That's mainly what it's for. And low, a little more clean. Okay. To the left of that, we are going to have the essentially the rate for the left and the right. So usually, this is weird too. To the left, it's slower. To the right, it's, sorry, to the left is faster. To the right, it's slower. So if I want like left and right, you can see, let's make the right more high so that we get more ping pong. The left and right aren't the same. Okay, and then we do have the center, so we have the right down. Okay. And it's just can do the wow on it. Or have more of a, like a techno delay kind of feedback to it. And then sides. Okay. And that's going to be the delay. Now from delay, we have the rotary effect. Now I'm not going to lie. The rotary effect, I am a little clueless on it. I know what it does. Distortion, and I do know what the settings do, but I've never had the pleasure of utilizing a cabinet, a Leslie cabinet, which creates this sort of distortion, which is what this is emulated by. And if you know U-HE, they do great emulation, some of the best. I mean, we're using Diva for a reason. So the rotaries are distortion unit, and I'm not going to lie. When using it, sometimes I wish it was in serum and stuff. Make like a G House pack with this guy, I would, because it can give some very interesting stuff that you won't hear anywhere else. Now the way we use it is we do have a mix, 0% dry, you know, you get it, 100% wet. Pretty self-explanatory. You can use it in parallel or just have it all the way up, which up to you how you want. From there, we do have the output. It has nothing to do with the distortion. Just after you've done your distortion, everything, it's the output. So you can make it loud. That's all. To the right of that, we do have stereo separation. Now, like I said, the Leslie cabinet runs, I believe, 2 independent, we'll say rotaries. Again, don't quote me because I'm not an expert. I've never had one. I wouldn't mind having one, but I'm sure it's expensive if it's sought after. But we do have, you could kind of say mics. From there, we have the balance. To the left is more horn. To the right is the bass. What I find is the balance is mainly you're going to see that the left is more higher frequency, more grit, while the right more bassy. So definitely using it somewhere around here is the strategic way to go if you want to preserve your low end. Or have 50% mix and go ham. Make a wide bass where the tops of the bass are wide, like the high frequencies, while the lows stay in the center of the mix. Okay, so that's going to be the balance. From there we have a drive, which is where distortion is going to happen. We're going to increase the output. We can mess now. It's definitely nasty sounding. One in mono. Now from there, we're going to have the slow and fast, which is going to control the speed of, again, the rotary. And again, I can't say it like that, but we have slow and the fast. And you can definitely hear it at very high value. So from there, you play with those, but... Okay, now from there we do have normal sync bass and no bass. Sync bass has nothing to do with a sync effect that we saw in utilizing here the triple VCO. It has more to do with the fact that, again, we have 2, let's call them microphones, 2 rotaries, and if you want them to go at the same speed, so you're locking them. And then that's normal. You're going to let them be independent of each other, so they each go at separate speeds. So this guy and this guy are going at separate speed. And then from there, we're going to have the no bass. So like I explained before, we have 2 separate mics. To the right is the bass speaker. To the left is the horn, as the manual states. So no bass just gets rid of this right speaker, and you're going to go with mainly the horn one. Okay. So with no bass, we do lose a bit of low end, so you just have to keep that in mind. Okay, but it does have a certain sound to it. From there, those are going to be all of the effects that we can find inside of Diva, and I think it's safe to say now that we can create some awesome sounds with everything that we've learned, because essentially we have pretty much everything, most of the important stuff in Diva. We do have in the next video a couple of modifications and trimmers to go by, but from there we're going to get more practical and start to make sounds after the next episode, just making sounds like for deep house, for trance, etc. We'll go down the list until the series is over, but with that being said, let's get straight into making some sounds. All right guys, so let's make our first sound. So for this, we'll use the Jupe 8 just for fun, and have the 2 saws set up. What I want to make is probably a +7th reef space, which you hear a lot in Anjuna deep stuff or anything more like deep. And the way we're going to do that, as you guys know, we're going to have one be super low and one maybe at 8, and going to go back on the perfect 5th. We're going to use a filter to get more of that sound we all know. It sounds really nice. Let's lower down the output a bit here, and I'll put my volume up. Again, we have a crossmode, which is a bit of FM. Just to add a little bit of unstableness to the sound. make it sound a little imperfect, which, you know, I think that's the way to go. That sounds really nice. We can cut it if we want with a high pass. We don't want that. From there, we don't really need to do anything to the frequency. We have enough modulation happening with FM to create that sort of detune vibe to it. Let's go 5. Okay, I don't like the hits, and that's the thing with this Diva, is it makes the envelope sound legitly analog, which sometimes can be too abrupt and too harsh. So we're gonna put a bit of attack to the sound. From there, we have the filter. We're gonna move this envelope 2 up a bit and maybe get more of a depth to the sound. We're gonna have sustain, so where it's gonna go the cutoff. Not that high. Let's put this down. Just messing it. We're going to put release so that we have this. We're going to go into mono mode here. We'll talk more about this next episode. Playing around with this guy a bit. Maybe a little bit of resonance would be nice. Rough. Okay, so I think I have it kind of where I would want it. Let's go with here, change the filter to a post maybe, so get a boost on the low end. Okay, now it's time to make the sound come to life. We'll use a bit of chorus. Usually I don't like to use it on bass sounds because the problem is that you're making the low end be wide as well, so it's all good though. We'll fuck that rule. Okay, so we're clipping a bit. Let's lower the wet. Now you can kind of see how it sounds a little too and kind of out of key at certain points. That's the rate and the depth, so we gotta kind of lower that down a bit. Okay, now I do want to add a bit of noise because I heard a bit there and I like that. I don't know if there's a way we can, but I think it's gonna be too loud. Like there, we can't really mess with that volume a bit unless we move this to the right. That's all good. We won't utilize it. That sounds good. Now we're gonna put a plate like Meduza, the wet high. Sounds really good. I think when you go up, that's beautiful. And yeah, we got the 5. We can do. It's a bit of detunement going on. I'm not a fan of, so let's go. Let's go maybe up on this. There we go. Now we can do more of a, let's go with, we'll do the 5 again. It's going to be more of like a deep kind of sound. I like it. Just standard so that kind of get... Now, with this sound a lot, you could just put reverb. It sounds really nice. The key is not to open it up all the way, but it's already sounding Meduza-ish. If you kind of get the drift, we can put soft. And we would probably want a chorus. We could put it after the reverb. And again, you're getting that vibe. Okay, again, here it's the chorus, so we can play and just get that. Go higher on this. Okay, so we have really nice sounds that we can kind of play around with that. You don't have to use a 7th here with the detune. You can definitely do more with that, but that's going to be one of the sounds. Now, let's go to our favorite, the mini mono, which is the higher CPU one. Let's make a bass utilizing the rotary. I think that'll be sick to do. We'll start with the distortion. We don't want to put the reverb before unless we want to create textures with that. Just standard theory. So let's go, maybe we'll go with a triangle. And then we're going to do a bit of wave shaping if the rotary allows us to do that. The way wave shaping works is you would go with multiple waves at different frequency, at different octaves. From there, let's move this guy to the right. We'll see if we can make a wub. Open it up more. Okay. Without it, with it on. Let's put the drive. Okay, goes. Mess around. Let's see what we got. Again, going 5. Not sounding the glide. Yeah, we definitely want to be more higher up. Drive. All right, let's see. Maybe sync. No big. Okay. Let's get rid of the attack. I'm not liking it. I am on headphones, so I don't know if the low end is good enough. Okay, a little better. I think maybe we'll go simpler with this. Standard bass. We can use feedback for distortion. That's a little better. See what happens if we add a bit of noise. It definitely doesn't do it like the tube distortion, which does imply that it is. The noise doesn't kind of mesh into it, which is what I would personally want. I like this sound in a way. Maybe we could put in LFO. More wubby. Sounds kind of cool. I would probably put this. Okay, let's. Let's see, add a bit of maybe like a phaser. We'll switch it up just to see if we can get something interesting like this. Sounding a little cooler now. We're gonna go with a 1/4 here just to get like the wub effect on it. That's good. Let's see a flange. Sync it. We're gonna play with the depth. Feedback up. That's just the flange doing its thing. And I like that, but I'm not liking the low end response. It seems a little too overwhelming. Let's see. That's more of a wub I actually would find a little more pleasing. Let's give a low size to it, low decay. Okay, now we can mess with this more. Use an envelope instead of LFO for more punch. That phaser's putting in work. I like the flange a lot. Like, that sound is... Rotary's cool, but I need it to sound not fucking detuned. We don't need detunement. But yeah, there we go. Now from there, I would probably try different filters, like maybe a UB, BP. Could maybe have the LFO move this. Let's go with maybe a different kind of saw down. I like that, but I would need a reverb to make it work, so that the lingering. Alright guys, so my camera stopped recording, but hopefully you enjoyed a bit of the sounds we made with the effects now. And again, I was trying not to make like the generic saw lead, etc., which I could have. We'll save that for like the towards the end of the series, where we just make sounds with Diva that we would want, like for trance, house, G house, etc., tech house. But hopefully you guys enjoyed the tutorial. You now know how to use the effects, and again, once you know, practice. Practice makes perfect. Once you start to realize how you can use these guys, you can definitely make sounds fast. And again, just have a lot of fun with it. But with that being said, I'll catch you guys another time for another video. You guys take care and peace out.